Hey guys, welcome back. All right, in science, we've been talking about matter. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. We've talked about properties of matter like color and shape and size and texture. We've also talked about states of matter like solids, liquids, and gases. And then we've talked about how matter can change, whether it's a physical change or a chemical change. So remember our three states. We have a solid. This is a spoon. It is made of solid wood. It does not matter what container I put it into, it's not going to change shape. This cup is also a solid because it doesn't matter what I put the cup in. I could put it inside this shirt and it's not going to change shape. However, the water inside the cup is a liquid because it is taking the shape of whatever container it is in. If I were to pour it out, it's going to flow. Liquids flow whenever you pour them. Okay, they're pourable, all right? So we are going to talk this week about how matter can change state, okay? So we have solids, we have liquids, and we have gases. Gases are all around us, right? So it's like the air, it's oxygen, it's the carbon dioxide that plants like, it is helium inside of a balloon, it is water vapor coming off a pot of boiling water, okay? So those are all examples of gases. And we're going to talk about how does matter change from a solid to a liquid? Or how does it change from a solid to a gas? Or a gas to a liquid, or a liquid to a solid? Okay, so we're going to talk about all of those today, and we are going to go into the kitchen to see how it's going to work. All right, so I have moved to the kitchen because something that we need to help matter change states is heat, and where better to get heat than the stove? Okay, so if you're going to do this, you need to make sure that you have a grown-up with you. So this is not something you can do by yourself. You need to make sure that you have your mom or your dad or another adult to help you do this, okay? So let me fix my phone a little bit. There we go. All right, so I've got my frying pan and I have one of our little blue ice cubes left over from our thunderstorm experiment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the heat on to about medium to medium high. I feel like I'm on a cooking show right now. All right, so I have my ice cube and I'm going to drop it into the pan. So right now this ice cube is a solid. Okay, it is a solid. It is not changing shape when I stick it in the pan. However, when I add heat, and you can see the burner's on with that hot red color of the burner, when I turn that burner on, now I'm adding heat to the solid, okay? And what is it starting to do? It's starting to melt. It's starting to change from a solid to a liquid. So the process of a solid changing into a liquid is called melting, and I have to add heat in order for that to happen. Okay, so the more heat I add, the more it's going to melt. And it's going to melt and melt and melt and melt until it's all liquid. And you can see I have a lot more liquid than I had. Now this liquid in here is taking the shape of the frying pan because it is taking the shape of whatever container it's in. Okay, so we're going to keep going until the ice cube is melted. And then what's going to happen as we continue to, I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit. As we continue to add heat to this liquid, something else is going to happen. What do you think it's going to change into? It is going to keep changing. It's going to change into a gas, and that gas is called water vapor whenever I am adding heat to liquid water. When I add heat to other types of liquids, it's not necessarily called water vapor. Okay, so the heat is continuing to be added, and you can see some little smoke coming off the top, except it's not smoke, it is water vapor. So what happens is when you add heat to a liquid, all the molecules inside get really excited and they heat up and heat up and heat up, and then they get released into the air. Do you see all of this water vapor coming off the top? Okay, so this is called evaporation. So when you add heat to a liquid and it becomes a gas, that is called evaporation. Where have you heard that word evaporation before? In the water cycle, exactly. So whenever we have a body of water, and now we've hit the boiling point. I'll talk about water cycle in 1 second. I'm gonna turn the heat down some. But the boiling point of water happens whenever, getting a little foggy on the phone camera. The boiling point of water is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature that this water has to reach before it starts to boil, like you see these bubbles right here. Okay, so anyway, back to the water cycle. In the water cycle, when you have a big body of water like a pond or a lake or an ocean or a stream or a pond or a puddle, any of those, and you add heat from the sun, then that water starts to evaporate and the water rises up, right? And what does it do when it rises up? It makes Clouds. What was that process that clouds make, that water becomes a cloud through? What is that process called? Anybody remember? It's called condensation. So I'm gonna put a plate over this. I'm like pretty high above the pan so it's not burning me. Again, you definitely need an adult to help you do this if you decide to do this. And I'm just gonna hold it over here for a second. And what's important is that the plate is much, much, much cooler than the water inside the pan. And so what's gonna happen as the water starts to evaporate and it's now a gas, as it hits this cooler plate, what do you notice? What is that? It's wet. It's liquid water. So whenever this gas state of water, this water vapor, makes contact with something that's cool, that makes it turn back to liquid water, which is called condensation, okay? Now, I'm gonna turn the heat off. If I were to pour this, the rest of this, because a lot of it has evaporated into water vapor, but if I were to pour the rest of this liquid into a container, it's gonna take the shape of that container. And I can continue to take heat away by putting it in the freezer. And if that happens, it's going to, once it's in there for long enough, it's going to be able to turn back to a solid through a process called freezing. So when we have freezing, it is the process of a liquid changing back to a solid when we take away heat. All right, so let's review all those. Solid turning to a liquid is called melting, and we have to add heat to do that. A liquid turning to a gas is called evaporation, and we have to add heat. Then we start taking heat away, and if I take heat away from a gas, it can become a liquid. And when I take heat away from a liquid, it's going to become a solid. So that's the whole, it's kind of like a cycle of how a matter can change states. And you need to know which ones do you add heat to, which ones are you taking heat away from. Okay, so those are a few ways that matter can change states, especially when we're talking about water. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that. If you decide to do this, remember, you have to have a grown-up. All right, have a good day, guys.